After the rise of the Islamic State, during the times of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and in the later periods including the Age of Andalusia and the Ottomans, we have considered the oldest historical mosques in more than 12 Arab and European countries. In order to see the landmarks of those time periods and the Islamic conquest that are associated with them, and the role that they played in spreading the civilization of Islam, which the Arabs are carrying forward with every passing generation. And so, the mosques we cover in this series have many historical stories since they were founded. The mosques in this series have stories that have to be told and cannot be forgotten. Their stories are a living embodiment of the age of Islamic Renaissance. They are part of Islamic history. They are the oldest and most important mosques in the world. Mosques with a vibrant history. With God's permission, they were built to last. Damascus, the capital city of the Zengi dynasty. It witnessed a boom in the construction of schools and charitable organizations in the time of Nur al-Din Zengi, at a rate that far surpassed that of the construction of mosques. This was also the case at the start of the Ayyoubid era, since the efforts of Saladin were focused on the construction of forts and other military institutions. The mosques, which were in fact built during the Zengi and Ayyoubid eras, were simple mosques in their terms of architecture, a far cry decoratively from the mosques of the eras that came before and the ones that would follow. Historical analysis points to the fact that these two dynasties were in power at the height of the Muslim confrontations with the Crusaders. Circumstances would have forced those in power to direct all available funds towards anything that might help with the efforts to defend what had been built by the Muslims, including educational institutions and practice, as well as the social and community building facilities and patient care.
At face value, it would appear that the Ayyubids did not build many mosques, but it is only reasonable that when a nation is busy with jihad, and when there is the constant threat of crusader attack, that the construction of defensive and military structures would take precedence. And in this case, the words reminding us that all of the earth can be our mosque and is fit for prayer could not be truer. But this does not mean that they were not interested in the construction of mosques, because, as you know, Ayyubid schools, Sunni schools that is, were massive academic cities divided into 4 sections, each of which was dedicated to each of the 4 creeds, within which were their own mosques. So these schools themselves were mosques in place of their counterparts in different eras.
Most historic schools we now see in Damascus date back to the Zengi and Ayyoubid eras. These schools were normally part of larger mosques or vice versa, and these establishments include those which are known as Al-Nuria schools in Damascus.
We are now in front of the house of Prophetic Hadith, or what is also known as a Nuria house of Hadith, which was established by Nuruddin Mahmud Zengi. Concurrent historians did not record a specific date for its construction. However, the Orientalist Nikita Eliseyev researched it and found that it was built in the year 566 after Hijrah, which contradicts the plaque which claims that it was built in the year 559 Hijri. The famous traveler Ibn Jubayr visited Damascus in the year 580 after Hijrah and chronicled seeing this establishment which had been recently built.
The Salahiyya neighborhood in Damascus is another example of Nur al-Din Zanki's interests, in the footsteps of which the Ayyubids followed. It was in this neighborhood that an immigrant Palestinian community lived. Nur al-Din Zanki took great care in the building of educational, healthcare and other establishments, in addition to simple mosques, most prominently Omariya school or madrasa.
This Omariya school in the Salihiyya neighborhood was built by Muhammad bin Ahmad bin Qudama al-Maqdisi, an immigrant from Jerusalem. This man, who was a scholar, was often visited by Nuruddin Mahmud Zengi because of his austerity and piety. Of course, it was Nuruddin Zengi who first built the foundations of this madrasa in 555 after Hijrah.
This neighborhood is home to other schools and mosques which date back to the Zengi and Ayyoubid eras, including the Hutton Mosque.
We are currently inside the Hutton Mosque, which is also known as the New Mosque, in the Salihiyya neighborhood, or as it used to be called, the City of Salihiyya or the City of Knowledge. This mosque was originally built by Asmat ad-Din Khatun for a different purpose in the year 577 after Hijrah. Of course, Asmat ad-Din Khatun was the wife of Nuruddin Mahmud bin Zengi and was later the wife of Salah ad-Din Yusuf bin Ayyub. After her death, she was buried here in the year 581 after Hijrah.
Another similar establishment is the House of Hadith, known as Al-Ashrafiyya, in the Sahiyya neighborhood in Damascus, which was built during the Ayyoubid era.
This is Dar al-Hadith al-Ashrafiyya in the Salihiyya neighborhood, which was built by the king Al-Ashraf al-Ayyubi in the year 629 after Hijrah, and so it dates back to the Ayyubid era. Across from it is a Turba Takritiya, or the burial site, which was built by the Vizier Taqi ad-Din al-Takriti in the time of the Mamluks in 698 after Hijrah.
The most prominent mosque of the Ayyubid era, still to be standing in the Salahiyya neighborhood, is the Hana Billah Mosque, also known as the Mathari Mosque, in reference to al-Mathari, Salah al-Din's brother-in-law.
The most important thing inside this mosque is its pulpit. The only similar pulpit to have existed was in Jerusalem until it burnt down. The construction of this mosque was completed with the completion of the pulpit in 604 after Hijrah, as is inscribed here. In 604 Hijri, the Prince Al-Muzaffar Kukbur. The pulpit was originally built with 3 steps, with the speaker sitting on the 4th step at the top, imitating the Prophet's pulpit, peace be upon him. The first person to sit on that pulpit and address the crowds was Muhammad bin Qudama al-Maqdisi, who was also the founder of the mosque. The mosque itself is known for being one of Damascus's most beautiful.
Another one of the Ayyoubid mosques, which is still standing in the neighborhoods of Old Damascus, in Okayba neighborhood, built by the Ayyoubid king Al-Ashraf Musa.
We are now in one of the mosques built in Damascus during the Ayyoubid era, which is known as Toba Mosque. This mosque lies in one of old Damascus's neighborhoods, which is known as Al-Uqayba. It is also known as Al-Ayba by the residents of the area, but its official historical name is Al-Uqayba. It is said that before this building was a mosque, it was a khan, known as Khan al-Zinjari, and that the Ayyoubid king, Al-Ashraf Musa, ordered the construction of a mosque atop the remaining foundations of this khan. Its construction was complete in the year 632 Hijri, and it became known as the Toba Mosque.
The city of Aleppo in north of Syria is home to many buildings that are excellent examples of Zengi and Ayyoubid architecture. These include mosques, madrasas, and charitable institutions. There are two mosques at the Aleppo Fortress which belong to the Zengi and Ayyoubid eras, both of which are unique in their architectural simplicity. Even the rocks used in the Ayyoubid architecture of the fortress were appropriate for military use.
We see large rocks in the structure of the castle, and these date back to the Ayyoubid era. The Mamluks relied on smaller stones, as we can see here.
The Zengis renovated the oldest of mosques in Aleppo, and that is the Ayyoubid Mosque, which dates back to the era of Islamic conquests. The renovation itself was also done with a typical, simplistic Zengi style.
The mosque's Qibla, or prayer room, is representative of the era's architectural style, because, as you know, each historical era has its own distinctive style, both for the construction of mosques and many other buildings as well, including homes, forts, and palaces. This mosque, as you can see, has a small area and is very simple in its architectural style, but it still holds great historical value.
It seems that at some point this mosque was destroyed, and so was rebuilt by Nuruddin Zengi, who converted it into a madrasa. The madrasa itself is associated with Sheikh Shu'aib ibn Abu al-Hasan al-Andalusi, who died in the year 596 Hijri. The man is famous for being one of the men who Nuruddin believed in, meaning he believed in his goodness and was very generous towards him. That is why he set him up at this madrasa, where he taught lessons related to Shafi'i jurisprudence.
When we say a Shu'aibiyya, we mean a madrasa, because this mosque's function was not limited to being a house of worship, but was also a place for receiving instruction in all aspects of scholarly endeavor. The Shu'aibiyya mosque also functioned in the same manner during the Ayyoubid era.
This simplicity of style and functionality was something that Saladin aimed to reproduce in the forts he built or renovated in the Levant and Egypt. Doing so by building mosques that will serve both aspects simultaneously. A great example of this is in the Saladin Fortress in Latakia in north of Syria.
After Saladin came to this area and took over the fortress, he kept everything as it was and only made additions, which included the mosque, madrasa, and the hammam. As for the Byzantine and Crusader architecture, no changes were made at all.
The same thing was also done by the Ayyubids in the city of Busra in the south of Syria, when they took advantage of the existing structures, adding madrasas and mosques, and fortified their defences.
The Ayyubids worked on building a school, which formed the nucleus of the school of Al-Dabbagha, or the Madrasa of Qamushtaqin. This school, this madrasa, was a mosque where the Quran was taught in addition to other religious studies. There is also another school known as the School of Kamushtaqeen, which is built next to the Mosque of Mabrak al-Naqa, which was built during either the late Ayyoubid or early Umayyad era.
To the south of Busra, and in the region of Ajloun in the north of Jordan, there was a major garrison for Saladin's troops, and here he built one of his most important fortresses. It is next to the fort that the Ayyubids built a mosque which is still standing to this day.
Ajloun's Ayyoubid Mosque is a mosque built by the Ayyoubid king Najm-ud-Din al-Nasir in the year 645 Hijri, as is indicated by the engraving on one of the foundation stones which sits atop the mosque's main door. The mosque, which sits in the middle of the city of Ajloun, consists of a prayer chamber, which measures 28 meters by 15 meters. And in the middle of that chamber are 8 pillars which hold up the roof, which is topped with a square dome, decorated with floral engravings. We are now in the Asura Castle, which was built by the Umayyads and was renovated by the Ayyubids, in the middle of whose open courtyard sits the Ayyoubid Mosque, which was built at around the same time as the renovation of the castle by the Ayyubids.
The region of Ashraq in the Jordanian desert, which was and still is an important crossroad, was a point of interest for the Ayyubids, so they built a stronghold for their troops in it, at the center of which a uniquely styled mosque built out of basalt stones still stands.
We are now in the Ayyoubid Asura Castle, which, as you can see, has a mosque in the middle of its courtyard. The Ayyoubid Mosque is built out of black basalt stones. The mosque has a single doorway on its eastern facade. It has a distinct niche in the Qibla wall. The roof of the mosque is made up of basalt stone slabs, leaning on arches, carried by pillars in the center of this mosque.
The city of Shobak in the south of Jordan was also an area of the Ayyubid and Crusader confrontations. Near its famous castle is an Ayyubid mosque, next to which is a burial site for those victims of the confrontations.
Not too far from the Shobak Castle, which you see in the distance to my left, lies the mosque and the memorial of the Martyrs, which were built by Malik al-Salih Najm-ud-Din Ayyub. The reason this mosque is special is that in the year 1973, when great floods covered this area, a part of the cemetery was revealed, during which a group burial room was found, full with the remains of nearly 20 bodies of the soldiers of Saladin, who were involved in the siege of the Shobak Castle.
Cairo is where Saladin worked relentlessly, trying to gain support for his defense against the Crusaders, and on the edges of which he built his famous castle. It was also a point of interest for the Ayyubids, and especially when it came to one particular mosque, and that is the Mosque of Al-Imam al-Shafi'i, located in the historical neighborhood, which is his namesake. In his honor, the Ayyubids converted the mosque into a madrasa for teaching al-Shafi'a jurisprudence.
I am walking out of the Shafi'i mosque after performing noon prayers. Both the mosque and the dome are named after Al-Imam Shafi'i. The followers of the Imam claim that this is the most magnificent dome in Egypt, or even the entire Muslim world. It was here that Al-Imam Shafi'i lived when he came to Egypt from Iraq, where he edited his creed to what we know it as today.
The Imam al-Shafi'i was Egypt's expert on jurisprudence. He was specifically Cairo's expert on jurisprudence because that's where he lived, and that is why most of the people in Cairo follow his creed. So it is normal that one of the largest schools was established to teach his creed to his followers in Cairo by the Ayyoubids. There are, of course, other schools for the Malikis and for the Hanafis, and their greatest interest was over the legacy of Ash-Shafi'i because the majority of the people in Cairo followed his creed, as I said before, and that is why the Ayyoubids took such a great interest in him.
The Ayyoubids who followed the Zengi in their interest in education and in military organization exhibited this spirit in all of the buildings they left behind and in the mosques they built in, which both religious and educational functions worked simultaneously.